Greetings, warrior. You already know what you should be doing. That is the part nobody talks about. The self-improvement industry has built an empire on the assumption that what you lack is information. That if someone could just explain the right system, the right routine, the right sequence of steps, everything would finally click into place. But you have the information. You have had it for a long time. You know what your body needs. You know what your work requires. You know the habits that would move your life forward and the ones that are quietly pulling it apart. The knowledge is not the problem. The problem is the distance between knowing and doing. That distance has a name, and it is not laziness. It is not weakness of character. It is not some fundamental flaw in who you are that disqualifies you from the life you can clearly picture. The Stoics had a precise word for it, akrasia, acting against your own better judgment. The gap between the man you know you are capable of being and the man who actually shows up when the alarm goes off, when the work gets hard, when the easier option is right there and nothing is stopping you from taking it. Every man who has ever tried to build something real has stood in that gap. Marcus Aurelius stood in it. He wrote about it, not from a place of theoretical distance, but from the raw, honest admission of a man who struggled with his own resistance every single morning and chose, despite that struggle, to move anyway. Epictetus taught students who were educated, capable, and fully aware of what they needed to do, and who still needed to be taught why awareness alone was not enough. Seneca wrote letters filled with the urgency of a man who understood that time was moving, whether you were moving with it or not. Discipline, in the Stoic framework, is not a personality trait you either have or don't. It is not a gift distributed unevenly at birth. It is a practice, a daily, imperfect, cumulative practice of choosing the harder thing, not because it is comfortable, not because it feels good in the moment, but because you have decided with full clarity who you are and what that person does when no one is watching and nothing is forcing your hand. That decision is what today is about. If you are ready to close the gap between who you are and who you are capable of being, claim this in the comments. I build myself daily. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Discipline is a decision, not a feeling. The first and most important thing the Stoics understood about discipline is the thing that most modern approaches to it get completely wrong. Discipline is not a feeling. It is not motivation. It is not the surge of energy that arrives when you are inspired, when the goal feels fresh, when the vision of who you want to become is vivid and close. Those feelings are real and occasionally useful, but they are weather. They come and go without your permission and without reliable timing. A man who waits for the feeling of discipline before he acts will be waiting for the rest of his life. Epictetus was direct about this distinction in a way that leaves no room for comfortable misreading. He taught that the quality of your life is determined not by what you feel like doing, but by what you have decided to do, and by the degree to which your actions are governed by that decision rather than by the fluctuating conditions of your emotional state. This is not a call to suppress feeling or to pretend that resistance doesn't exist. It is a call to stop giving resistance a vote. The decision has already been made. The feeling is irrelevant to its execution. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with a specificity that makes the Meditations read, at times, like a man arguing with himself in real time. He wrote about mornings when everything in him wanted to stay in bed, when warmth and rest were immediately available, and the demands of the day felt heavy before they had even begun. He did not romanticize those mornings. He described the internal argument plainly, and then described the resolution just as plainly. Get up. The work is waiting. No one is coming to do it for you, not as inspiration, as a decision that had already been made, reasserted in the moment it was tested. The practical shift this lesson asks for is a simple but demanding reorientation. Stop asking how you feel about what needs to be done. Start asking what you have decided. Feel the resistance, because it will be there, reliably and without apology, and then act anyway. Not because the resistance isn't real, because the decision is more real than the resistance. That ordering practiced consistently is what discipline actually is. Not the absence of the hard feeling, the choice to move through it. If this reframe is what you needed, drop this below. I act on my decision, not my mood. Lesson 2. Your environment is your first discipline. The second lesson addresses something the Stoics understood intuitively and that modern behavioral science has since confirmed in considerable detail. The man who relies entirely on willpower to maintain discipline has chosen the most expensive and least reliable tool available to him. Willpower is finite. It depletes. It is affected by sleep, by stress, by hunger, by the accumulated weight of every small decision made earlier in the day. A man who burns through his willpower fighting an environment that is actively working against his intentions will have very little left for the moments that actually matter. Seneca wrote about the importance of guarding against influences that quietly erode the character you are trying to build. He was speaking primarily about the company you keep and the conversations you allow yourself into. But the principle extends directly to the physical and digital environment a man inhabits. What you surround yourself with is not neutral. Every element of your environment is either making the disciplined choice easier or harder. And the man who arranges his environment deliberately, who removes the friction from the things he should do and adds friction to the things he should not, is not cheating. He is being intelligent about the nature of his own mind. Think about what this looks like practically. The phone left in another room the night before, so the morning belongs to intention rather than algorithm. The work materials left visible and ready, so the path to starting is clear rather than cluttered. The food that supports the body you are building within reach, and the food that doesn't, further away. None of these changes require heroic willpower in the moment. They require one decision made in advance that shapes dozens of smaller moments without demanding fresh resolve each time. The Stoics called this kind of preparation ascesis, disciplined self-training, the deliberate structuring of your daily life to support the character you are committed to developing. It is not weakness to design your environment in your favor. It is the recognition that discipline is not about enduring unnecessary difficulty. It is about removing the obstacles between you and the person you have decided to be. If this landed, stamp this below. I design my life for discipline. Lesson 3. Start smaller than your ego will allow. The third lesson is one that the Stoics understood through the lens of nature itself, and that most men resist precisely because their ego makes it feel like an admission of inadequacy. The lesson is this: the obstacle to building discipline is almost never the size of the goal. It is the size of the starting point. Men set enormous targets, feel the full weight of the distance between where they are and where they want to be, and then fail to start at all. Or start with a burst of unsustainable intensity that burns out within 2 weeks and leaves them further back than when they began, now carrying the additional weight of another failed attempt. Epictetus used the image of the fig tree with his students. No great thing is created suddenly, he told them. The fig tree does not bear fruit in a day. The man who plants a seed and then digs it up the next morning to check whether it has grown has not been diligent. He has been impatient, and impatience in the building of discipline is not a minor inconvenience. It is the specific mechanism by which most men destroy the very thing they are trying to build. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again to the idea of doing the next thing, not the whole thing, not the ultimate vision, the next thing, the decision in front of him, the task available right now. This was not small thinking. This was the precise, disciplined focus of a man who understood that enormous things are built entirely from small, consistent actions, and that the man who is always looking at the summit rarely watches where he places his feet. The practical instruction is uncomfortable in its simplicity. Whatever you are trying to build, the physical discipline, the creative practice, the professional habit, start at a size that feels almost embarrassingly small, not the version that impresses people, the version you can actually sustain. Then sustain it. Then let it grow naturally from its own momentum. Consistency at a small scale compounds into something large. Intensity without consistency produces nothing but exhaustion and the story of another thing you tried. If you're done waiting to start big, leave this below. I start small. I stay consistent. There is a version of discipline that most men are chasing that does not exist. The version where it stops being hard, where the resistance fades and the right choices become effortless and the gap between knowing and doing finally closes for good. That version is not coming. The Stoics did not promise it. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up one morning to find that ruling an empire had become easy. Epictetus did not reach a point where the practice no longer required practice. What changes is not the difficulty. What changes is your relationship with it. The resistance becomes familiar rather than surprising. The hard choice becomes the expected choice rather than the exceptional one. And the man who has built genuine discipline is not a man for whom it is easy. He is a man who has decided that easy was never the point. Lesson 4. Use discomfort as evidence of progress. The fourth lesson requires a fundamental reinterpretation of something your nervous system is going to keep telling you, regardless of how much philosophy you absorb. Discomfort is the signal to stop. That is what it feels like. That is what it has felt like since you were old enough to feel anything. The sensation of effort, of resistance, of strain, physical or mental or emotional, arrives carrying the message that something is wrong, that you should ease up, that the sustainable choice is the comfortable one. The Stoics did not argue with the sensation, they argued with the interpretation. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the discipline of reframing difficulty, not as evidence of a problem, but as evidence of engagement with something real. He trained himself, deliberately, repeatedly, against the grain of his immediate instincts, to interpret the sensation of resistance as confirmation that he was in the right territory, that the difficulty was not a sign he had made a wrong turn, but a sign he was approaching something worth the effort. Not every discomfort is meaningful, but the discomfort that accompanies genuine growth almost always is. Seneca made the same point with characteristic directness. He wrote about the value of voluntary hardship, the deliberate choice to do the harder thing even when the easier thing is available, not as punishment but as training. A man who has never chosen difficulty when comfort was available has not tested himself. He does not know what he is made of. And a man who does not know what he is made of will hesitate at exactly the moments when hesitation is most costly. The reframe this lesson asks for is specific. When you feel the resistance, when the alarm goes off and your body protests, when the work gets hard and your mind suggests a break, when the disciplined choice is visible and the undisciplined one is right there, reinterpret the sensation. Not "this is hard, so I should stop. This is hard, so I'm exactly where I need to be." That reinterpretation, practiced enough times, changes the meaning of discomfort. And a man for whom discomfort means progress is a man who is very difficult to stop. If you're ready to use resistance as fuel, type this below. Difficulty is my evidence. Lesson 5. Hold the standard when no one is watching. The fifth lesson is the one that separates men who have discipline from men who have the performance of discipline. And the Stoics considered it among the most important distinctions a man could make about himself. Because discipline that only shows up when someone is watching is not discipline. It is reputation management. It is the careful maintenance of an image rather than the genuine cultivation of a character. And the gap between those two things, invisible on the outside, enormous on the inside, determines everything about who you actually are when the circumstances stop being favorable. Epictetus taught this without softening. He said that the true test of a man's philosophy is not what he says in public or how he behaves when the stakes are visible. It is what he does in the small, unobserved moments when no one is recording and no one will know, and the choice between the standard and the comfortable deviation costs nothing in terms of reputation. Those moments are not minor. They are, in the Stoic view, the actual substance of character. Everything else is performance. Marcus Aurelius held himself to a standard in the pages of his Meditations that he explicitly noted no one would ever read. He was not writing for posterity. He was writing because the practice of holding himself accountable to himself in private without an audience was the specific mechanism by which he maintained the integrity between who he said he was and who he actually was. The journal was the invisible accountability. The standard held in the dark was the one that mattered. The practical question this lesson puts to you is a direct one. Does your discipline look the same when no one is watching as it does when someone is? Is the standard you hold in private the same standard you present in public? If the answer is no, and for most men, honestly examined, the answer is at least sometimes no, that gap is not a character flaw, it is a training opportunity. Every unobserved moment in which you hold the standard anyway is a deposit into the account of who you actually are. Those deposits compound, and eventually they produce a man whose public and private selves are the same person entirely. If this is the standard you're committing to, claim this below. I hold my standard in the dark. Lesson 6. Recover without drama. The sixth lesson addresses the moment that ends more disciplined practices than any other. Not the moment of failure, because failure is inevitable, universal, and in the Stoic framework, completely beside the point. The moment that ends practices is the moment after failure. The response to the missed day, the broken streak, the week that went sideways, the standard that was not held. Because for most men, that moment does not produce a simple correction and a return. It produces a story, and the story, told with the full force of the inner critic, laced with shame and self-judgment, and the familiar narrative of "I knew I couldn't sustain this," does more damage to the practice than the failure itself ever could. The Stoics had no patience for self-flagellation. This is sometimes surprising to people who associate Stoicism with harsh self-discipline, as though the philosophy demands that you punish yourself for every deviation. It does not. What it demands is something far more rigorous and far less dramatic. It demands that you assess what happened accurately, identify what can be learned from it, and return to the practice immediately and without ceremony. Not after you have sufficiently suffered for the failure, not after you have rebuilt the motivation to the level it was at before. Now, simply and without story. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this return repeatedly when he had failed to live up to his own standards, and he did because he was a human being living under impossible pressure. His response was not extended self-criticism, it was examination followed by recommitment. What happened? Why? What the correct response would have been? What the correct response will be next time, and then forward. The practice was not to be perfect. The practice was to keep practicing. The man who can miss a day and return the next morning without the weight of a story about what the miss means is nearly impossible to permanently derail. Because the only failure that actually ends a practice is the one followed by the decision to stop. Every other failure is just data. Collect it honestly, use it well, and keep moving. If this is the relationship with failure you're choosing, write this below. I fall, I learn, I return. Lesson 7. Let your identity lead your behavior. The seventh and final lesson is the one that holds all the others together. The foundation beneath the foundation. The thing that determines whether every other practice described in this video becomes a permanent part of who you are or remains a collection of techniques that work until they don't. It is the question of identity, not what you are trying to do, who you have decided to be. There is an enormous difference between a man who is trying to build discipline and a man who is a disciplined man. The first man is in a constant negotiation with himself. Every morning is a fresh argument about whether today is the day he follows through, whether the conditions are right, whether he has enough motivation to sustain the effort. The second man is not negotiating. He is simply acting in accordance with who he is. The discipline is not something he is working on. It is something he is expressing, and when it is an expression of identity rather than an achievement of effort, the entire relationship with consistency changes. Epictetus understood this as the core of Stoic practice. He did not teach his students to try to be philosophers. He taught them to decide that they were philosophers, and then to allow every subsequent choice to flow from that decision. The identity precedes and shapes the behavior, not the other way around. A man who waits until his behavior is consistently disciplined before he allows himself to identify as a disciplined man has reversed the causality. The identity has to come first. The behavior follows. This is not self-deception. It is the precise mechanism by which genuine character change occurs. You decide with full seriousness and without waiting for external confirmation that you are the kind of man who holds his standard, who shows up, who does the work when it is hard and when it is easy and when no one is watching and when everything is working against him. You decide that first, and then you go find out what that man does in every situation life puts in front of you. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but from the foundation of a settled identity rather than the shifting ground of motivation and mood. That decision is available to you right now, not next week, not when the circumstances are better or the conditions are right or you feel more ready. Now, in this moment, the man you are deciding to be is waiting on the other side of that decision, and he has been waiting long enough. If this is who you are deciding to be, own this. Leave it in the comments. I am disciplined. Warrior, here is the truth you carry forward. Discipline was never about perfection. It was never about the man who never struggles, never misses a day, never feels the pull of the easier option. That man does not exist. He never existed. Not in Rome, not in ancient Greece, not anywhere that human beings have ever actually lived their lives under real pressure with real consequences. What the Stoics built, and what Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and Seneca all described from the inside of genuinely difficult lives, was something more durable and more honest than perfection. It was the daily practice of returning, of deciding again each morning who you are, of holding the standard not because it is always easy, but because you have determined that it is yours, of falling as every man falls, and returning without drama to the practice that is building something in you that cannot be built any other way. 7 lessons. Discipline is a decision, not a feeling. Your environment is your first discipline. Start smaller than your ego will allow. Use discomfort as evidence of progress. Hold the standard when no one is watching. Recover without drama. Let your identity lead your behavior. None of these ask for perfection. All of them ask for consistency. And consistency, applied over enough time with enough honesty, produces the one thing that cannot be faked, cannot be shortcut, and cannot be taken from you once it is genuinely yours. Character. Not the performance of it, not the image of it. The real thing, the settled, unshakable, privately held knowledge of a man who has shown up for himself enough times, in enough unobserved moments, that he no longer needs anyone else to confirm who he is. That man is who you are building, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one return at a time. Seal it in the comments. I am building something that cannot be broken. If you want more content like this, ideas that cut through the noise and give you something real to work with, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are building something here together, one video at a time. Thank you for being here. More clarity is coming. Stay with us, warrior.